All right, guys, well, it's officially almost 4:04. I'm going to call the start of this wonderful event right now. For everyone joining at home, welcome to the Female Future, a special virtual event hosted by Naked Wines USA and the lovely Erin Kirschenmann, the managing editor of Wine Business Monthly. You should see 6 beautiful smiling faces on your screen, who are 6 of the 23 women winemakers that you fund here at Naked. They're joining us for this discussion. We have Carmen from South Africa, Alex calling in from Napa, Jen calling in from Australia, Ondine from Healdsburg and Russian River Valley, what she represents, Jacqueline calling in from Napa, and Camille calling in from around Napa, all in the same valley. So lovely to have you guys here. I'm gonna pass it over to Erin to start the discussion, and we have such an incredible hour ahead of us. So I hope you guys all have a glass of wine like I do and enjoy. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. It is really an honor to be here surrounded by 6 incredible winemakers. Let's be honest. Who would have thought this is how I would be spending my Tuesday afternoon? It's kind of the perfect way for me to end the day. Just a little bit about me and who I am. I am the managing editor of Wine Business Monthly. We are a trade publication that is based in Sonoma. And what we do is not so much rate wines and talk about wine profiles, but we write articles that are meant to help winemakers like these lovely ladies. We talk about the nitty gritty. We were joking on this call earlier about pumps. Like that's something I write about a lot, but it doesn't seem like all that attractive for the wine industry. We talk about grape growing, sales and marketing and business and technology. So I'm really just thrilled and honored to be talking to these winemakers because they all have such a different perspective on what winemaking is and how you make wine. And so that's something that really just makes my heart sing, is to listen to winemakers talk about their passions. So one of the things I do want to talk about today is how we all got into wine. And I want to start out just letting you know a little bit about me and how I ended up in wine. I was that nerdy, weird kid who knew since she was 8 years old that she wanted to be a journalist. Didn't care what it was. At one point, I thought I was going to be the editor-in-chief of Rolling Stone. No, that's never going to happen, and I'm kind of glad that's never going to happen. But I worked my whole life to become a journalist, to become an editor. And I ended up working at an insurance publication that was meant for agents and brokers. And not the most fun industry to work in, if I'm being entirely honest. I just happened to stumble into wine. After working that job, I went on Craigslist and started looking for a new position because I couldn't write about insurance another day. And I saw a position at Wine Business Monthly and I said, oh, they're looking for an editor. I can edit. And oh, it talks about wine. Hey, I like wine. This could work. At the time, all I knew was that there was red and white wine, and I liked both. So I took the job, and it has been the greatest discovery of my life. I love knowing how all the little intricacies of the weather and the soil affect the vine, how the vine produces these beautiful grapes that winemakers like these ladies then ferment and turn into something that we all sit around and enjoy at a dinner table or around a fire pit with our friends, or really just because we've had a long day at work. And there's just so much that goes into that one particular bottle. So this webinar right here, this is me living out my dream and getting to help tell stories, tell these women's stories. So today I really want to focus on them and their journeys, getting to know them, how they got into wine, what their career has been like, because they're not all the same. And I also want to take some time at the end of the day to stop and take a look at wine as a whole. You know, there's so much that goes into that glass that you're drinking that we as wine drinkers don't always think about. And so I want to pick their brains. So rather than introduce each of them with a kind of boring recitation of their illustrious careers, I want to introduce them to you through some questions. So if you have questions as we go through this conversation, please drop them in the Q&A. I'm going to try my best to address them as we go along, but if I don't, I promise we're going to leave some time at the end. All right, my first question for this panel. So some of you have been in the business for many years or grew up in winemaking families, but I want all of you to think back. What was your wine aha moment? When did you know that you wanted to work in the wine industry and you knew that you wanted to be a winemaker? Not a marketer, not a vine grower. When did you know it was a winemaker or nothing else? And so Carmen, I'm going to start with you. Could you answer that question for us?
Thank you, Erin. I think mine is very much like yours. I come from a very different. I don't come from a wine making or wine drinking background at all. You know, actually in my community, wine was seen as a real evil because of our history. But when I was really, really young, very, very early, young age, I had a reading problem, and my mother used to give me novels that she read, and it was a nice escape. If I think back now, because I always wondered, I wonder what give me that click. I want to be in winemaking. And if I think back now, it's, you know, what they describe in these novels is completely different from what I am used to as a child and where I grew up. So does that escape to greener, it's almost like a luxury, completely different from what I'm used to. So I was about 8, 9 when I said to my mom, I'm going to be a winemaker. But my aha moment for the winemaking was, funny enough, a lady, they described a woman winemaker from California. And I don't think at that point in time in my life, I even think where California was, that blended wines. And that for me was, I said, Mom, one day I'm going to be a winemaker. So I think even my mom was quite surprised when I did end up much later in my life as a winemaker. So,
I love
yeah,
hearing
that's mine.
You're a fellow 8-year-old girl who's just like, I know exactly what I want to do. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Now, Jen, I think you came from kind of the opposite background, right? You come from a winemaking family. So when did you decide that you were going to follow the family business?
Yeah, you're right, Erin. I grew up with wine flowing through my veins, red wine naturally, and my whole life I used to say, when I grow up, I want to be the best winemaker in the world, just like my dad, which my mum reminds me of all the time. So yeah, from a really young age, I used to say that. I used to jump on my bike after school and go to the vineyard and just be out in the vineyard until dusk with my father. And I was pretty naughty as well. I developed a bit of a side business when I was in primary school. I would acquire bottles of the famous Rutherglen Muscat from my parents' cellar and take them on the school bus and sell them to the high school kids. And I subsequently, when I finally told my parents when I was about 30, I found out I was getting more money than they were at the time. So very enterprising indeed. But yeah, I think the real, so, you know, it was just always there, always around me. It was a very natural thing for me to do. But I did have a real time of rebellion where I was like, there is no way I am ever going to come back and work in this business and be a winemaker. And yeah, went away and studied in a completely different field, and then came home after completing that study. And I thought, I'll just do vintage and earn a bit of money and then go overseas and travel. And my dad gave me the responsibility of making the Pfeiffer Shiraz that year. And I made the wine, and that wine won a gold medal, and I was hooked after that. So that was it for me.
I wish I sat on the bus next to you. Yeah. That is incredible. And I love that, you know, kids were buying this too. There's some incredible Rutherglen Muscat.
Well, I understood the market. They like sweet. And so Rutherglen Muscat is a sweet wine. So, yeah, there was a little hole in the warehouse and I could sneak down to the warehouse, get the bottle, push it through the hole, go onto the outside of the warehouse, get the bottle. I had this little stash among the trees of bottles of Muscat, and I would take one on the school bus and sell it to the high school kids when I was about 8 or 9 at this point in time. So, yeah, very enterprising.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Camille, I think you also came, you grew up in Bordeaux, I believe, right? And so winemaking was surrounding you. So you have sort of a similar tale. When was that aha moment for you?
Well, actually, Bordeaux is pretty broad and lots of different industries. Coming from Bordeaux, it's not necessarily having a background in the wine industry. So actually my parents, my dad loved wines. He loved wineries. He loved going to the wineries because the chateaux in Bordeaux are in some areas really mesmerizing. So he just enjoyed going around and visiting the chateau and doing that. But that wasn't the aha moment for me. I mean, I wasn't that interested, kids are served wine most of the time with water early on Sundays. You have a little spit of wine in your glass. I wasn't too very interested at the beginning, but growing up, I thought I would become an agronomist. That was my goal in life, work in a research station. And I did. I was lucky enough to get some jobs in what's called the INRA in France, which is a national research and agronomic institute. But to me, that wasn't enough. I was missing a big portion of what I wanted to do. Researching was great and knowing about science and doing all that was awesome, but there was no making, there was nothing to make. So it was extremely difficult for me to find what can bring me to the agriculture, to have a connection with a plant or something growing, and in the same time be able to exploit that and make it into something. So at one point, kind of early, winemaking became, this is exactly what I want to do. At that time in my life, I was more interested in wine than when I was a kid. So that's pretty much what brought me to winemaking, the research of being in agriculture, but also being in an industry that was making a wonderful product, a transformation of the nature into something we can absorb.
That's beautiful. And research is wonderful. Reading about wine or the vines or the region is fun, but there's nothing quite like being there, standing there. And if you're ever lucky enough to participate in a harvest, and it's almost magical. And it sounds, that you saw that magic in making that product. Yeah. All right, I'm going to move to Ondine. Ondine, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, and that I like calling it the aha moment.
Parents funded journalism brought both of us to wine, but mine at a much earlier stage. I started university and was taking a journalism course, and the assignment was to attend a course of study for a week and then report back on it. And it had to be a course of study that you weren't familiar with, or at least had maybe only passing familiarity. And I chose viticulture because I honestly didn't know what it was. And I couldn't believe it. I truly, literally had one of those light bulb moments where after attending a couple of the classes, I think there were 3 sessions that week, I couldn't believe there was a career that married everything that I loved together. So that was food and wine and hospitality and science and just a whole lifestyle and a mindset. And so I figured out when I was 17 and got on course, changed my major, and that was it. So it was kind of a roundabout. I still very much love other disciplines like writing, but truly that was just one of those transitional things, and I never looked back. I feel so fortunate to have had that moment.
I might have to hit you up for an article later now that I know you've got that journalism background. This is great. Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got your start?
Okay. Well, I had no idea that there was a wine industry that existed. I grew up in San Francisco. My parents were in the finance world. I thought I was going to be a banker or tax person or somebody of that nature, and I was off at boarding school. And I loved the sciences. I needed to go to college somewhere, and I was applying to the UCs. When I was applying to UC Davis, I didn't find any major that I liked. And I got to the end of the major list, and in there was women's studies and this thing called viticulture and enology. And at the time, I could not say that word, those two words, or understand at all what they meant. They are the study of grape growing and the study of wine making, not just from grapes. So the two together is the study of making wine from grapes. And I checked that box on the online application and told nobody. I had no idea what I applied to. I didn't think I was going to get into Davis. I didn't think I was smart enough. The list could go on. And I got in, I visited Davis. I loved the campus. I loved the students I met, the faculty I met at the enology school there. And I was like, all right, I'm going to Davis. I'm going to study winemaking, and if all else fails, at least I love science, and I will do something. And I just loved every class. It got better and better. The people I met were incredible. I got an internship working for Trefethen Family Vineyards in Napa Valley right out of college, and I loved it. I think I spent a little bit of time at Naked Wines, not as a winemaker, to work on the business side. And I missed winemaking so much that I said, please, can I go back? Please, can I just try and make another wine and be a winemaker and be given a chance and an opportunity? And if I fail, it'll be okay. But I think that if it's my passion, I'll succeed. And I really felt that way. And I still feel that way. It's totally my passion. I now get to do it 100% of my time. And I couldn't be more excited to have that opportunity.
It sounds like you have made some really bold choices on your path, and I applaud you for that. And just want to echo something that's happening in the chat. We are so glad you just checked that box, because your Chenin Blanc is beautiful. So thank you for checking a random box and making a great Chenin Blanc.
Thank you. It is, I love making that wine. It won Best of Class in 2018 vintage. The 2019 vintage sold out too fast. We didn't save enough to submit to the Chronicle. We will make sure to save some, so hopefully it wins Best of Class again.
Perfect. And last but definitely not least, Jacqueline, can you tell us your aha moment, please?
I think my aha moment mirrors Alex's just a little bit. We actually were in university at around the same time. I entered UC Davis, and I was in a marketing major, but I knew from within my heart that I wanted to do something that combined art and science. I just didn't know quite what it was. And when I found winemaking, I knew that was a perfect match. It's something that is challenging, and you can continue to learn. And the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And there's layers of things to discover and try and achieve. And it's just a really amazing line of work to be a part of. And so when I went to university, I was influenced by my childhood. When I was younger, we were not a winemaking family. My parents were entrepreneurs, but we were a family that loved to eat and spend time at the table and have friends over. And with that was always bottles of wine, and there was always a culture to it. And, you know, there's something to sitting down and opening a bottle of something that you know the story of intimately as a winemaker, and being able to share that on a whole new level with your friends and family. And so that that aha, I don't think I had a single aha moment, but as things happened and as I grew in my career, it was ever more evident that it was the right thing. It was a good spot for me to be in.
I love that story, Jacqueline, because sometimes, you know, a love and a passion for something almost ends, it starts on a chance, but every day, the more involved you get, and like you said, the more you learn and the more you realize you don't know, the more driven you are to find those pieces out. And it's absolutely amazing.
And the more confident you become to ask the questions. I started in my career really young, and I did a lot of big things really young. You know, I helped build the Naked Wines winery in Kenwood when I was in my early 20s. And that was something that is huge to do. And you know, you get the feeling that you just have to keep moving forward. But when you become more mature in yourself and more secure, you know that you can ask certain people questions and build on those and build on that knowledge that you already have.
Absolutely. I want to keep running with this topic, you know, and I'm going to throw this out to the group, but as you started in your careers early on, whether you were young or you had made a mid-life career change, or, you know, you're like me and you're still sort of like deciding where exactly in wine you want to go, what were some of the challenges when you started out? Was it asking the hard questions like Jacqueline had mentioned already? What were some of those challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome those? And I think I'm going to throw this one to Jen first. Jen, you're on. There we go.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to mute before because we had the big forklift going past. So yeah, just had to do that. So I think one of the biggest challenges for me initially in starting my career, because I did come from a winemaking family, was being able to find my own feet and step out of the shadow of my father. My father was an exceptionally highly regarded wine show judge within Australia, and I could not go to any wine region, any winery without people saying, "Oh, you're Chris Pfeiffer's daughter." And that was a lot. That happened, you know, for a long time, and I was, you know, trying to find my, you know, my place and you know, be able to shine my star, I suppose. And yeah, I think it was tricky because you know, as you all know, I've got a pretty exuberant personality, and it probably led me down the path of being a little bit naughty at times, and the red-headed gene definitely took over and maybe led me down some different paths. But I honestly feel that Naked has been really important for me to help me find my voice and help me, you know, be able to really establish myself. And it's really nice when people come to the winery now and they say to my dad, "So you're Jen Pfeiffer's father," and that's pretty cool.
That's fantastic. Camille, could you maybe tell us a little bit about what some of your early challenges were making that leap from research to winemaking?
I mean, I was thinking about it. It wasn't extremely challenging because it was so exciting to start learning about winemaking. What was challenging is the fact that I knew that I will never know anything about it. there was definitely this sense of you can learn everything about it, but really what's going to happen every year is going to differ every time. So I think that was as soon as I finished school, the only thing I knew is that I didn't know anything. And maybe part of it because I wasn't coming from an agricultural background. I've been raised in town, and I was not necessarily the most intuitive when it came to plants. I mean, I loved them, but I felt probably like I didn't know as much as a kid from the countryside. so and in Bordeaux, my peers in school were certainly more astute in terms of winemaking because they grew up in it. So I had this complex of inferiority in a sense that I always felt, and I still feel like I don't know much about it. I'm just watching the years go by, and it seems to work every year what we do, but yeah, I mean, it's more intuitive, it's more instinctive than than it is otherwise. Anyway, so I think that maybe the biggest challenge to just be aware that we know some stuff, we know how to calculate addition, do stuff in wine, but really the perception of finding the right grape and finding the right moment to do pump overs, or how much, how long, and all that is really every given year you make these decisions.
You're absolutely right, Camille. Who knows what Mother Nature is going to throw at you from one year to the next. In California, there could be a wildfire or a drought or torrential rain. Carmen in South Africa is dealing with a very late harvest. It sounds like you were telling us, prior to the call that, everything was coming in later than usual. Carmen, would you mind jumping in on this question? When you first started and you started your winemaking career, what were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
I would say the biggest challenge for me was getting accepted into university to study winemaking. I qualified as South Africa's first Black winemaker, not because there was no interest, but because we were not allowed to study winemaking. Certain career paths weren't open to Black people in South Africa. So when I first applied, I still have the correspondence from the college, and they hate me for this. My mother keeps everything, and it was very clear that the college is only open to white South Africans. And the second year I applied, I just thought I'm not going to get in there somewhere or the other. The second year I applied, they said, but you have no agriculture background, and also you didn't do any military service. Now, I'm not the tallest of people. I put on a lot of weight over the years, but I was always tiny and small, so I wouldn't even fit into military service, So on the third attempt, during the second year, when they said they cannot accept me, I somehow got a page through a magazine, and I saw that a correspondence college offering general agriculture course. So I enrolled for that. And with that first results I got from that, I then decided to go to the college. Now, the college it's quite a distance from where I grew up. And I promise you, I come from pre-94, which was the first democratic elections in South Africa. You didn't speak back to white people. And I don't know, if I think back now, I don't know where I got the guts, but I remember going to the college and insisting on seeing the head of the college, and I waited for an hour. And then I said to him, this is the third time I'm applying, and if you don't accept me, I'm going to the newspapers. I don't know where I got that. I don't know where that came from, but if I think back now, I cannot believe that I actually did that. So the first challenge, and then I was accepted. But it was also political changes in South Africa was turning quite fast. And, I think it was a case of they had no choice anymore. And then coming into the industry, oh my word, was that a shocker. Being a woman, being not white, it was like everybody was, firstly, it was like, what are you doing here? What do you think you're doing here? It was so in your face. I would go to tastings and people would say, why are you here? And if I said something or I commented on a wine, it was always met with, how would you know? Where do you get these terms from? And the one thing I've learned over the years is your background plays a big role in how you describe a wine. Because it's childhood memories, it comes back, and people just did not want to hear that. And I remember being part of a tasting panel much later in my career, and one of the professors which was very well known in South African wine industry, and he probably trained most winemakers in South Africa. He took me on a wine comment that I made. And again, I just said, excuse me, we both are here for a reason. You have no right to question how I describe a wine. That is why we're both here. And you should respect my view. And I was amazed that he immediately backed down. And this was a big guy, not just big in the industry, big in structure. He was like, oh, Carmen, I didn't mean it that way. And I was like, okay, I should open my mouth more. And then I need to, what Jen said earlier about naked wines, really, really gave me a platform to show what I'm capable of. Because before that, I worked at a smaller cellar that was owned by an American couple. But the industry, there was no real way for me to go on my own. Financially, it was impossible. Getting the right markets, and getting a market abroad, that was quite a challenge. And then I got this call from Rowan, and it completely changed my perspective and what was possible, and really gave me the push to go on my own, to have confidence to go on my own, and also to have the backing of such a huge company that believed that I could do it. So, yeah.
Go, Carmen.
Yeah. I'm like over here trying not to just cheer with you as you go up to the head, and you just say, I'm going to go to the newspapers if you don't let me in. I'm trying to stay calm because we're not on mute right now. But thank you for sharing that, Carmen, that your strength and your tenacity, I see tenacities popping up in the chat quite a bit, are 100% admirable, and you are a true inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
I want to build on this. We talked about how you got your start in wine, and I guess I'd like to ask the group, what advice would you give others who are looking to start a career in wine? Maybe they want to start making their own. They've been a fan of it for a long time, and they've never really had the confidence to say, I'm just going to try it. What advice would you have? And I'm going to pass it off to Ondine first.
I would take a broad approach. I think that one of the challenges in the wine industry is knowing just the scope of it. It is such a wide-ranging industry with so many different ways to be, even just to be a winemaker, there are so many different approaches. So I would definitely advise anyone who's interested in it to kind of expose themselves to a wide range of things. If you're young and coming in, seek for rotational development opportunities where you're exposed to things like the finance side, the marketing, the sales, the production, the operations, all these different components that taken together make you a very holistic winemaker, and having that sort of awareness of what it takes to actually get a bottle from field to shelf. I think that's something that I didn't have an immediate appreciation for, or understanding of when I entered the industry. Of course, I've gained it over time, but in hindsight, goodness, I wish I had had some of that awareness, because it definitely informs decision-making and also opens your eyes to different opportunities.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to jump in with their words of wisdom?
I think everybody should be as bold as Carmen.
You only realize that in hindsight. I think
Yeah.
if there's anything I can say to a young person, that I was amazed when Alex earlier said that when she looked at the options at UC Davis, that there was study, what did you call it, studies for women or women studies? That, and enology and viticulture fell under that. That's quite extraordinary, because in South Africa, winemaking is very male. You know, it's only of late that more and more women are coming into the industry. But it's even tougher, even if you're qualified as a girl, to get a job. Let's be honest, there's only so many wineries, so there's only so many winemaking opportunities. Those opportunities definitely first go to people that comes from a winemaking background, and the guy and the girls they become reps, they become anything but winemakers, researchers. People throw them where winemaking is not really, the core. So I'm quite surprised and pleasantly surprised to hear that in your country that is seen as a career path for girls. It's promoted as that. That is fantastic. If somebody should ask me, I would say just don't take no for an answer. I took an intern this year, and it's a young girl, and she comes from the same type of background from where I'm coming from, and initially she was so scared to ask, and I think it was more being told, no, you can't, no, you do. And I'm really, I keep on saying that, just don't say, even if I say no, you can't, just say, but why? Just challenge it, just don't accept it. And that would be my go-to words for any girl or any young female. Just don't accept no and challenge it any other way.
I'm going to write that out, and I'm going to put that on my computer, Carmen. Don't accept the answer. Thank you. We've talked a lot about university, right? Alex, you checked a box. Carmen, you had to fight your way in. And I one of the questions that came in through the Q&A, so thank you for that. It was a great question. I think now that we've kind of talked a little bit about university and spending some time there learning the art and science of winemaking, we have a question from Barbara. Do you have to be good at science to be a good winemaker? And this is a really interesting question, because this is something we talk about in the industry is winemaking art? Is it science? What blend of the two is it? And so I think I'm going to throw this question to Jacqueline first. What do you think?
So it's a really interesting question, because it could be debated either way. I say that because my partner, my husband, is also a winemaker, and he approaches it very differently. He is very regimented, and this is why we do this way, and writing all of the notes, and I'm a little bit more, well, I think it's going to taste good. Let's give it a try. We'll try it out and move forward. And I think it moved a little bit more from my heart, but it's always with a knowledge of how the science supports that. And so I think that it's important as a winemaker to know some of the background of science, and that's not impossible to learn by any means. But I think that it's so much more, and I think you need to have the ability to appreciate the art side of it as much as the science side. So a little bit of, yes, you need to understand science behind it, but it's not what you have to hang your hat on to be a good winemaker by any means.
Anyone want to advocate more for the science side of the?
I'll say something. I think it really depends on what role you want to play in the industry. If you are in a large corporation, it's very helpful. And if you're dealing with grapes from all different areas, potentially grapes that have issues, if you're trying to replicate a taste from year to year rather than be inspired by the vintage, it kind of depends on your context. I mean, for me, context is always everything. And generally speaking, if you are in a large corporate winery, it really helps to be very technically savvy and know your chemistry inside and out. And that's just because of the demands of the job and the rigor and the expectation. If you're doing individual projects or smaller family style thing, then you have much more latitude to be a bit more creative or whimsical in your winemaking. But if you are trying to look for, I think stability is probably one of the things we could all agree on. Most people do not want to find sediment in their wine, like crystals, tartrate crystals. So understanding not only that that can happen, but what you can do to prevent it and the actual chemical reactions that are taking place in the wine so that you can prepare for that in advance. So it's not that you have to be excellent at science to make a good wine, but to be successful on a larger scale, it's definitely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say the time that I use my science background the most is when I have a problem and I'm trying to figure out what is causing that problem, because the only way to fix the problem is understanding where it came from, and it is more times than not scientifically causing the problem, whether it's microbiology or chemistry or nutrient deficiency in the vineyard or in a fermentation. And it's just much more science-based. When you have a problem and you need to correct it, you have to do the opposite reaction to fix it. And so really understanding the science in that instance, I think helps you make you a better winemaker, because you can take a problem wine and get it to a place of drinkability. And I don't think any one of us on this call are going to say every wine we make is perfect and it gets into a bottle. I mean, this is a live living thing that we are trying to make. And there's always something that happens where you have to kind of work towards fixing it or bringing it into a better place than it currently is in. And really understanding the science behind what's causing it will help you to have a really positive correction or solution for having it not happen anymore, or to use that problem to make it into something better. So, but yeah, I love the art side.
I agree. I agree with both Ondine and Alex. But I think that if you are interested in becoming a winemaker and you don't have the science background, that shouldn't hinder your ability
Absolutely.
to enter the industry by any means. And I think that's really important, because you can learn it, and it's totally approachable when you research it and start somewhere.
Absolutely. It's relatively basic science. That is the core root of all of it. I cannot do biochemistry to save my life. So you don't need that. At least I don't think so.
Just to add on to that, I studied journalism. I was an English major. In college, I tried to take as few math and science courses as absolutely necessary, basically what it took to get through my general education credits. And I, as I learned my love of wine and I started to study the science behind it, I found it all pretty accessible too, right? And you just have to stop and really think about it. And if it's something that you're passionate about, you know, maybe you're not going to pass biochemistry or, you know, an advanced level organic chemistry, but you can understand the basics behind it and why cold stabilization stops those tartrates from forming down at the bottom, right? And those sorts of things.
Can I say something really funny? It's just, this is a huge evolution in my career. Is we had to know our math and science coming out of school. It was just expected because we calculated a lot of things by hand. And now there are all these cheat sheets online. So every website, every chemical supplier, every additive supplier, they all have these little things. Just plug in your gallons, plug in what you're trying to get, and it does all the math for you, which I still won't use them because I'm so used to doing it by hand. But you used to actually have to know some of it, do your own pH logs and things like that. So the industry has so many tools as far as not discouraging anyone. Yes, it's like anything else, it can be found online.
And it's a very sharing industry. You know, I don't think we're shy in sharing. You know, someone calls you, this is what's happening to me. You know, I think, I mean, I always find a lot of support from everyone all the time. So I don't think it's extremely necessary to be that strong in science. Just have a mind well logical, just be logical.
Yep.
I think it's interesting, certainly in Australia, in terms of university education. I see a lot of qualified winemakers coming out of uni who have a good grasp on the science, but a very limited grasp on the practical side of making wine. You know, connecting a hose to a pump is very foreign to a university graduate. And I, you know, every year we get interns for vintage and graduates out of Adelaide University, which is the main university for wine in Australia. And, you know, we talk about that potentially the course needs to be more like an apprenticeship where you're learning practically at the same time as theoretically, because the practical components will really confirm all the theoretical components. And I, you know, I think that would be really, really beneficial because it is a practical pursuit. And certainly with experience, we all become better winemakers.
I just want to, I agree what Jane says, and I can see it with my intern. She comes from the University of Stellenbosch, where I studied at Elsenburg Agriculture College, and that to connect the chemistry with practical, almost practically thinking. It's initially I thought, oh my word, I feel so sorry for this girl. Is she ever going to get it right? Because just thinking practical is very important. I think as a winemaker, if something goes wrong, you need to make a plan. You need to know what the next step is. So I agree. I think that at university level in South Africa, they must really try and either incorporate more practical into the actual winemaking course, or they need to maybe not just do a final year as an internship, you know, at the university or at the cellar to get experience. But I also want to tell you, Jen, I don't know if you know this winemaker, Lindley Shaw. He's a real Australian winemaker that came to South Africa for about 10 years. And he was my go-to guy. If I had a problem, I met him once, thought, you know a lot. So I later called him my wine encyclopedia. If I had a problem, I'll go, Lindley, I'm sitting with this. What do you think I should do? And this guy was phenomenal. His knowledge on chemistry, winemaking, and how to bring it together was absolutely phenomenal. And he left 3 years ago, and I actually went to the farewell parts. How am I going to get through all of this? You're going to be kind of call you in Australia. So I must say, a lot of Australian winemakers, I also feel have a really good grasp on the chemistry stuff. But maybe it's because there's a lot of Australians and New Zealanders in South Africa making wine. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I certainly think we have a really strong support in the research area within the Australian industry as well. The Australian Wine Research Institute is one of the leading institutes on wine, and so that offers a lot of support to us from a scientific point of view for problem solving and things like that. So I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
Well, I'm getting the note that I cannot believe it. It's already time to start wrapping up. But Carmen, I really want to take what you said about your mentor and what Camille said about this being a really open, sharing, collaborative industry. And I'd love, could somebody tell me a little bit about their mentor, the person who inspired them, who helped them overcome a problem with the science, or gave them the idea to follow their passion? You know, who was that person who really just gave you life within the wine industry and really helped guide you? Would somebody like to share their mentor? I'm going to go to Jacqueline then, since nobody's responding.
Oh boy. My mentor. You know, it's interesting because you have that question, okay, well, what is a mentor? And what, having been in the industry, for 10 years now, I've had many, you know, and it's not someone that you just walk up and say, will you mentor me? And, you know, in some rare and really wonderful cases that is, but I haven't seen that. But I have seen the ability to, you know, work underneath amazing winemakers and talk to people and ask questions of people and get answers back. And I have so many. So for instance, when I was straight out of college, you know, talking about learning how to hook up pumps, you know, we traveled around in Italy, Spain, New Zealand, talking to winemakers in each of those regions and asking them questions and working alongside of them. And several of them I still communicate with on a regular basis. You know, we follow each other on social media, they see what I'm doing, but they were some of the first influences on my decision to make, when I came to Naked Wines and had an idea of a portfolio, to make wines from wherever I wanted and however I wanted. You know, I make an Albarino, a Sauvignon Blanc, a Cabernet Franc, you know, and it's not following a certain theme, but that's because I've had so much influence from so many people around me. I had someone ask me about, you know, my Cabernet Franc, and that was influenced, my idea to make Cabernet Franc was influenced by my first mentor at my first full-time job here in the Valley. And he did that as a side gig, and he brought this Cabernet Franc in and did an extended maceration, which is leaving it after fermentation on skins for an obscene amount of time, like 5 months or 6 months, and then pressed it off. And, you know, we're like in March or April, and he's like, time to press. And it was just my first introduction into, oh my goodness, you can really push boundaries here and try new things and taste some really amazing products from that. And so I haven't really had a specific mentor, but I've had many along the way.
I love that. All right. Well, I'm getting we need to wrap up. I'm sorry, everyone. I feel like this group could talk for 3 hours, and if I weren't I'd still be taking notes, right? And all the things that I want to follow up with you about. I want to hear more about how harvests are going and which wines you would make if money were no question, if COVID were no question, if you could travel anywhere in the world and do all the harvests, which one would you want to do? I have so many questions for the group, but I know I want to leave it to those who are attending as well to get their questions answered. So Kim, if you want to come on and go through some of the questions, I'd love to pose them to the group.
Sure. So I know we're coming up to the end here, so there were a lot of questions. If your question didn't get answered, you can message us on social media or shoot me an email, and if we didn't cover it on the seminar today, but there are a couple that we can go over now. So from Laura, this is for Camille. As someone who is looking to make a career change in her mid-30s into winemaking, I am curious, how did you transition from being an agronomist to winemaker? Were you afraid of taking the leap? If so, how did you overcome that?
Well, it was in my mid-20s. So my path was rather chaotic. So it wasn't a big leap because every single thing I did from high school on was very chaotic. I dropped off of high school, so I didn't really follow a path that got me to INRA that was necessarily academic. So anyway, so everything was a leap in my life. So this one wasn't a big deal. And I was still in my 20s. I was still discovering myself. I think I was 26 when I started to go to wine.
Wonderful. Another question is from Greg. The most interesting location for grape sourcing in your careers, or the most interesting type of grapes you've worked with? So we can, whoever wants to answer that. And Jen, it looks like you're coming forward.
Oh, please let me talk about Portugal. So my absolute favorite place in the world is the Douro Valley. And I know that you have Oscar Quevedo as one of the naked winemakers, and he's from the Douro. It is just a magical place. Portugal is a country which does, you know, a lot of blends, and so which is really different for me to Australia, where we're very focused on, you know, single varietals, and so yeah, working in the Douro, working with Portuguese varieties, making heaps of blends. That is like the place for me. That is where I will run to if I ever leave Rutherglen.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, we are at the end of our hour here. So again, I'm going to go ahead and drop our Instagram link into the chat in case we missed any of your questions. So we can definitely get to those later. And we can also encourage you guys to visit each one of these wonderful winemakers, winemaker pages on our website and chat with them, get to know them even more than you did in this hour. But Erin, I'll let you wrap it up.
Thanks, Kim. And I just want to individually thank Carmen, Jen, Alex, Ondine, Camille, and Jacqueline for joining us today. You guys are the absolute best. I've enjoyed this hour with you, and I wish we had so many more. Thanks to everyone who is joining us today and for sending in a lot of great questions. I wish we could have gotten to all of them. But hopefully when all of this COVID nonsense is over, we can all get together and have a conversation over a glass of wine.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Erin, just one question. Sorry, I just wanted to ask you. When we started the chat, you said that you write a certain post, or you write specific things for on a certain site. Can you repeat that site, name of that site?
Yeah, it's the publication is called Wine Business Monthly, and our website is winebusiness.com.
Thank you.
Great publication.
It is fantastic.
Okay, for you look it up.
Thank you, Erin, for leading the questioning. It was awesome.
It was my honor. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
ladies. I'm gonna sleep now.
Good night, Carmen.
Bye-bye.
I'm gonna go and make wine.
Good night.